Hello, everyone. It's Lionel Sandner from Pembroke Publishers. Thanks for joining us today, and a belated Happy New Year to everyone. I know it's almost the end of January, which seems crazy, but I haven't seen any of you since the start of the new year. So, a belated Happy New Year, and it's great to have you here tonight. Tonight we have our guest is Cris Tovani, and she'll be talking to us about why do I have to read this. If you haven't come across Cris before, she's an internationally known consultant who focuses on issues of disciplinary reading and writing instruction. She was awarded the 2017 Thought Leader Award from the International Literacy Association. And she's also an adjunct professor at the University of Colorado and the University of Denver. And we were just busy talking about, we had a similar passion in football, and sadly it's different teams, one from Denver and one from Seattle, but we seem to have found a detente in there and can agree both have strengths and weaknesses. So we share that passion along with reading as well. Cris is an author of 5 books, most recently, Why Do I Have to Read This?, what she'll be talking about tonight. Cris has taught students from grades 1 to 12 and continues the study in the knowing-doing gap by investigating how best practice research can be practically applied to a variety of instructional settings. And when I saw that the best practice and application, I immediately went, ooh, this is going to be interesting, because whenever you can blend those two, that's something that we can take back into our classroom and weave into our own professional practice. So Cris, it's great to have you here. Folks, I will be monitoring the chat, and if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in there, and I'll bring them forward at the end of the session so that Cris will have an opportunity to answer them. So with that, I'll pass the virtual mic over to you, Cris, and welcome. It's great to have you here.
Great. Thank you, Lionel. Thank you for that nice introduction, and thank you to Pembroke for hosting me tonight. I'd just like to really thank all of you teachers out there who have worked all day, and now you're on screen with me. So I'm very humbled by that. Thank you so much. We're going to kind of dig in. I don't know if any of you have heard this question before, why do I have to read this? But it was a question that I personally detest getting from students. And so I've really been working and trying to figure out how to answer that, or better yet, how to plan for it so kids aren't even asking it. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to show you one of my toughest cookies. This is Hugo, and he was in my first hour class that started at 7:10 in the morning. And boy, he was tough. I just could not get him going. He was probably exhausted, was one of the reasons. But he came to class wearing this mask of apathy and anger. And I remember after about 2 weeks of him not doing anything in class, I took his work folder and I headed down to the cafeteria to get some coffee to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to get Hugo going? And I saw him in the cafeteria, and he was with a bunch of his friends, and he had the most amazing smile and was laughing and joking. And I walked by, and he, very politely said hello to me. And I thought, okay, this kid does not wear the mask of anger and apathy all day long. So why is he wearing it in my classroom, and how am I going to take it off of him, or help him take it off, I guess. I think all of us are really fighting and battling disengagement right now, especially having kids online and doing this virtually. And so when I find myself in times of stress, I try to think about my bottom line. I try to think about, okay, if something's got to come off my plate, what's going to come off, but what absolutely has to stay on. And so I've got a quote here, and I wish it was a quote from your amazing poet, Mark Stroud, but it's unfortunately from a researcher named John Guthrie. And he is, it's a little dry, but I'm just going to do a quick little read aloud to you because this is taped in front of me at my desk, because it helps me to think about, all right, when all else is failing, what's one thing I can focus on? So the quote is, high engagement leads to high achievement, just as high achievement makes high engagement possible. Low engagement leads to low achievement, and low achievers read relatively less than their peers and avoid reading. Because engagement in reading and achievement in reading are mutually causal, they both must be cultivated in school. A neglect of one is a neglect of both. And so thinking about, okay, how do I keep kids engaged? And more importantly, how do I keep kids engaged in reading and writing? I look at this chart that kind of follows that quote in Guthrie's research. And according to Guthrie, students who score at the 98th percentile on standardized assessments, those could be provincial exams, they could be the ACTs, the SATs, International Baccalaureate, tend to read about 67 minutes a day. And they leave grade 12 with a word bank of 4.7 million words, which is just stunning. If you look at the kids who are scoring at the 10th percentile, they're only reading about a minute a day, and they're leaving us with 51,000 words in their word bank. And so we know that that's an issue of equity, because the better vocabulary you have, the more complex thinking you can express. So in my head, I'm thinking about, all right, how do I increase students' engagement in reading? How do I help them get those 67 minutes a day? They don't have to be all at once, but they do have to be in text that's at the student's reading level. And so keeping those two pieces in mind, I started thinking about questions that I get asked a lot when I do workshops. And to be honest, these are questions that I ask a lot. What do I do with kids who, don't want to think for themselves or waiting for me to tell them the answer? And, what about the ones who won't revise or reread? And how do I help kids who are below grade level? And then this idea of like kids not being motivated. I think we're really, a lot of us in the States are anyway, just struggling with kids who, just they're not motivated right now. It's so hard to get them to turn their screens on and participate. So these 4 questions were ones that I really tried to delve into in the book, Why Do I Have to Read This? So thinking about like what causes kids to disengage, that's a biggie for me. When I have a problem, I tend to make a 2-column chart, and I just on one side of the chart, I write down what might be causing the problem. And so, for me, sometimes kids are disengaged because they're reading below grade level and the material's too hard, or sometimes there's trouble at home. And I think with COVID now, people have lost loved ones, or there's food insecurity. I just try to make a whole big giant list of what are the possible reasons that cause students to disengage. And then I try to think about, all right, which ones do I have influence over? If mom and dad are getting a divorce, there's nothing I can do about it, unless I'm the one causing the divorce, which, if that's the case, stop it. But other than that one's got to come off my list. I can't fix that. But if the reading level is too hard, I have influence over that. I can maybe bring in a different choice of text. Or if kids don't see a reason for the learning, I can maybe flesh that out and be ready to articulate that to students. So I try to think about the reasons that are causing disengagement, and then what I as a teacher have influence over. For me, I found kids coming to class wearing, I didn't want to stigmatize anybody by saying they wear they're the class clown, because they're not always the class clown. When they act silly in one class, maybe when they're in the athletic field, they're serious as can be. And so I wanted to think about these masks as something that were temporary. That helps me get out of bed in the morning and do my job. It's something that with our teaching superpowers we can affect. So we've got kids who are the class clown who act silly, or we have kids who come to class appearing angry or apathetic. Sometimes we have kids who just put in the minimal effort. They may be the advanced placement student who's just turning in work that they turned in for another class, or they may be kids who just want to pass the course. We also have kids who wear that mask of invisibility, the ones who just kind of slip through the crack. So I organized the book around stories around students that wear these different kinds of masks, and then strategies and activities that I've used to try to help them remove the masks. So if you think about my friend Hugo in the first slide, this was him. This was him later in the year. Actually, one of the reasons why he came in so angry and apathetic was he was a struggling reader and writer. He was an English learner, and that sort of tough guy bravado, I think, kind of protected him from being vulnerable and showing, where his weaknesses were. And so thinking about, all right, well, if this is too hard, let's try this, and let me model this for you. Really sort of helped him take that mask of anger and apathy off, because we all know that a little success tends to breed more success. So before I talk about some more ways of taking off those masks, I just want to share another researcher, and some of her work around school engagement. So the circles are representative of some research done by Jennifer Fredericks and her team. They studied pre-med doctors who were going to school in Canada, and they looked at what was in place when students were actually learning the material. And they decided that there were really three different categories and three different types of engagement. The first one is behavioral engagement, and that's just simply knowing how a class works, knowing the rules, knowing the systems and structures, knowing what to do when your work is late or where to turn it in. It's also knowing the behaviors of the discipline. What are the behaviors of readers and writers? What are the behaviors of mathematicians? Behavioral engagement is important, but in and of itself, we can't guarantee that learning is happening, because as some teachers have learned with COVID, behavioral engagement might be disguised as compliance. We all know those kids who look like they're listening, they look like they're participating, but as soon as we turn our back, the phones come out. And so just making kids follow a list of rules isn't necessarily going to guarantee that kids are learning. And I think that's something that teachers who have heavily relied on behavioral engagement alone are really struggling with right now, because kids can just turn off their screens and they can just not show up. The second type of engagement, I think this is where I was the strongest, is this emotional engagement. This is where we can kind of like hook kids in the heart. We all learned in teacher school that the better relationships we have with our students, the better they will learn from us. But Fredericks and her team of researchers said, okay, that's part of emotional engagement, but that's not the whole ball of wax. As teachers, we can't be responsible for making every single kid like us. And so, yes, that student to teacher relationship is important, but so is connecting students to other students, because sometimes we learn because of who we're with. And so back in the good old days when I could see kids in person, I would try to group kids in pods instead of rows. Now I'm trying to put them into chat rooms and breakout rooms. I try to set up ways for them to collaborate. I want them to know each other's story so they have empathy for each other and try to build those relationships. There's also the student to curriculum. And I think this one's really important as well, this idea of giving kids a reason to care about the topic. And not just saying, well, it's going to be on the test, but an actual reason for it. So I'm going to work with a 7th grade science teacher tomorrow, a 7th grade geography teacher tomorrow, and he wants me to help him plan a lesson around deserts and label all the traits of a desert. And I'm just like thinking to myself, oh my God, that's so boring. Who would want to know about that? But then I started thinking, okay, with climate change, we've got more and more deserts developing, and what's the impact on animals? What's the impact on people? How does it affect our day-to-day life? So I'm going to try to do a little research tonight. I'm going to try to think about why deserts matter and why should kids care about deserts. I think I can also extend that by looking for texts that kids care about and defining targets and tasks that will also give them some reason to engage. The fourth kind of box of emotional engagement is that idea of students kind of figuring out what they need as learners and who they are as learners, and figuring out under what conditions they work best. And I think that's been really interesting with COVID and learning online. Now, the thing with emotional engagement is that in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean kids are learning either, because sometimes we can be emotionally engaged and we're just entertained. We're not necessarily learning, we're just entertained. So some of us have gone to workshops before and we've heard a speaker and we've all been inspired by that speaker, but we didn't necessarily leave any smarter. So to make that kind of circle, all those three circles work, I got to also think about cognitive engagement. And this is what really changed my teaching and my planning, that idea of giving kids a reason. Cognitive engagement is that need to know. It's sort of the purpose for the learning. And when kids are cognitively engaged and behaviorally engaged and emotionally engaged, we can almost guarantee 100% that students are learning. Now, the problem with cognitive engagement is that The only way we can tell if kids are cognitively engaged is by what they make, say, or do. So like right now, I can't tell if anybody's engaged because I can't see you. I can't, read the chats. So you could be nodding your head and putting really polite things in the chat box, but because we don't have time to turn and talk, and I can't peek over your shoulders and see what you're working on, I can't really tell that. But that's important to understand, because when we talk at kids, during that whole synchronous time, we put ourselves at a disadvantage trying to figure out how cognitively engaged they actually are. So as we think about trying to hit this sweet spot with all three of them, it's tough. It's tough to do. And so I got to kind of think ahead what kids might need before they even hit the room. Like, I know I'm going to have more Oogos in my class. I know I'm going to have kids who are reading below grade level. I can just anticipate some of those needs. I look at my friend Adrian. Adrian was a student of mine, and he really, he read way below grade level. He was in a reading intervention class that I taught, and he had figured out how to become invisible and how to totally avoid engagement. He said, when you're a bad reader, all you have to do is look tough and not say anything. And that's how you become invisible. And I think he and Hugo kind of had that similar connection in that, if they looked tough enough, teachers would just leave them alone. I paired his quote with another researcher's quote, Samuels and Farstrop. And one of the things that they say that really helps me when I'm working with struggling readers is that reading achievement is less about ability than it is about the opportunity to read. And I think as kids go through the grade levels and they get to, the middle grades and they get to high school, oftentimes we take away that text and we talk at kids. And we're doing it because we have so much content to cover. I understand that, but our worst readers are the ones who are getting the fewest opportunities and minutes to read. And so thinking about Guthrie's 67 minutes, how can I plan for them to engage and do that really important work? I think we can take those masks, help kids take those masks off and re-engage them. And so my friends that you see on the screen right now, these were students from Vancouver, Washington, and they were incoming 11th and 12th graders, and they were taking a summer school class that I was hired to teach. And so it was a credit recovery course for English. I had the kids for 2 weeks, 4 hours a day, and I knew that if we just sort of did the reading and writing standards and studied vocabulary and grammar, these guys were going to eat me alive. I knew that I had to come up with something that was going to hook them in the heart and hook them in the head so that they would want to dig into the reading and writing. This community referred to themselves as the working poor, which I later learned is that, they were parents and caretakers were employed and working 40 hours a week, but they weren't making enough to pay the bills. This was a very anti-immigrant community and a very pro-Trump community. And so I thought, okay, well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to study the Syrian refugee crisis. We're going to figure out what's going on in Syria with the civil war there. We're going to really address this question of, why are immigrants and refugees coming to the United States? And, should the United States be taking more? Because at this time, Trump had shut the borders and had, Canada, thankfully, you were taking so many refugees and we were taking hardly any. So we decided, I decided that we were going to study this topic and we were going to have a debate the last day of class with people in the community who actually worked with refugees. And the job of the students is to take a position and describe why refugees should be allowed or why not. And it was up to them which side they chose, but they had to defend it at this round table. So the picture that I have, the woman with her hands up with the long hair, she was someone who worked with, in the summertime, she would go to Greece and work with Greek fishermen and the Coast Guard to try to rescue people who were sinking on the rafts as they were trying to escape Syria. And she had like these amazing photographs and the kids were just spellbound. if I got to do this ever again, I would not invite her to do the round table that we had. I keep calling it something else, the round table, because she talked the whole time. I would have invited her to be a guest speaker. The goal is that students can actually share their position. We ended up calling this the Awareness, Action, and Empathy Summit. So kids had to know certain things. They had to know what refugees were versus immigrants. They needed to know what a humanitarian crisis was, and what they needed to know why people were leaving. They needed to know how to take a position and write a commentary. And so to get them ready for this final day, I had to have a lot of pieces in place. And so I started joking, to get ready for these guys before I even met them, I had to CYA. And we all know that CYA means curriculum you anticipate. It's actually in mixed company, it's curriculum you anticipate structures, but among us, we have to cover our ass. We have to think about potential students and their needs before they even get to us. And so as I wrote this book, I learned a lot about curriculum, and initially I didn't realize that curriculum is everything teachers do in a classroom. It's not just the handouts or what we ask kids to read, but it's the way we group them. It's the way we talk to them. It's all this, like, our affect. And so I thought, okay, this might be a really cool way to kind of structure some of the patterns that my instructional coach, Samantha Bennett, noticed from her notes. So Sam often comes into my classroom, or when I go on the road, she'll come with me and she'll script what she hears me say and what she hears students say. And she noticed a pattern. She noticed that there were 6 different things that I tended to do, not only when I did a planning for a unit, but what I also used on a day-to-day basis to kind of tweak or re-engage a student who had fallen off the wagon. So the first one is this idea, and I'm going to go through all these, is this idea of, like, topic. Is my topic compelling? And so I found this really funny. Well, I thought it was funny, but I'm not a math teacher. In Portland, Oregon, when I was out working in Vancouver, and it was, I'm glad I learned about parallelograms in high school math instead of how to do my taxes. It comes in so handy during parallelogram season. And I have that on my fridge because I think it's just kind of this reminder of, sometimes in our haste to get through content and standards, we forget why our subject area is so exciting and why we've dedicated our life to it. So the very first T for me is trying to think about, how do I find a topic that will cradle the standards and skills, kind of flipping on its head. I never start with standards and skills first. I always try to start with a topic that is relevant, that's current, and I try to find a case study that we can dig into. So the Syrian refugee crisis was happening at the same time that our president was taking children away from their parents and putting them in cages. And so there were about 4 or 5 kids who were undocumented, who didn't really want to study about Syria. And so they asked if they could study what was happening at the southern border. And so for them, I just kind of switched this case study, but we were still studying humanitarian crises. We were still studying what it meant to immigrate or be a refugee, and how they were different. The other 2 T's I kind of pair together. So I'm trying to think about standards as a platform, like a high diving platform that we want kids to hit. I don't think of standards as something I have to cover. Standards are something that I want kids to hit. And I think of the targets, the learning targets, as rungs in a ladder that help kids get to the top of that diving platform. And I want to have tasks that match up or marry with that target, so kids can show me what they know and need. So this is just an example of one of the charts that I was using with my summer school friends. And so in the morning, as soon as kids come in, I want them to look at the learning targets and get ready with any questions. Do they understand where we're going? Do they understand all the words? And do they also understand what they're going to make or do? And so that's where those tasks come in. So the makes and do's don't have to be fancy. It could be just, you're going to talk about this with your table mates halfway through class today, or you're going to leave me with 3 or 4 sticky notes so I can see what your questions are. But when I think about, all right, here's my target, what's the task or the do that kids are going to participate in to show me that they've hit that target? It kind of helps me decide on what a good target is. The next T is texts. And so, oftentimes I will have one whole class text that we're studying that allows me to model thinking strategies, that allows me to have a common experience with the kids. But one text for everybody isn't going to meet everyone's needs. And so I have to think about what are some other texts that kids can also read to build background knowledge and context around the topic. What are some different text structures, as well as reading levels. And so this was a unit that we did that I did with another group on war, and it was this idea of like, how does war impact individuals and society? So the U.S. has been at war for 19 years now. We have troops in Afghanistan, and people kind of just forget about it unless they have a family member who is over there. And so the things they carried was a text. The 3-Day Road is by a Canadian author, Joseph, and it's slipping my head right now, but that's an awesome one too that I've used before. But this was the text that we kind of shared together. And for some kids, they had it on tape. For other kids, I would summarize part of it. But I wanted to have a kind of like hub of a wheel that we could all experience something together. But then they had to have other opportunities to practice their reading and their comprehension, to build their background. And I also wanted them to see different text structures that connected, because that really ties into the students' make. So many times students will write a commentary before they do a roundtable or a summit, because that helps them flesh out their opinion. And so I want kids reading commentary so they can see what it looks like and have models. The fourth T is this idea of time. Like, how am I using time that I'm with kids? And this has been really interesting to think about, when I'm with kids synchronously, but also what are kids going to be doing in their asynchronous time? And so if I want kids to get better at reading and writing and thinking, and I think about Guthrie's 67 minutes, I need to plan for kids to be doing that reading, writing, talking, thinking for the majority of class. And so I asked myself some questions when I'm planning, like how are kids going to spend their time? What are they going to read and write and talk about? What do I want students to know and be able to do during that time or at the end of that time? How will I model? What will I model so kids can read and write and talk longer? And what are some needs that I can anticipate ahead of time? So my daily lesson plans aren't very fancy. They kind of look like this. And I start with that work time. And I think about, okay, what is it that I want students to do? What are some options and possibilities? And so I try to think about, what's the free choice reading that's at their grade level that's going to build context around our topic. That's often a choice kids are going to have. What's some writing that they're going to work on? In this particular setting, it was an open letter that they were writing to post on either their Facebook page, send to the White House, send to a family member, post on Twitter, but it was something that had to have an audience bigger than me. In order to write a decent letter, they're also going to have to be reading a lot of nonfiction to build their background knowledge around the issue. So during that work time, the kids have 3 different choices of what they're going to work on. I then think about what's the mini lesson, or what am I going to model that's going to help a bulk of those students stay engaged longer. Oh, thank you. Somebody just posted 3 Days Road by Joseph Boyden. Thank you very much. Great book. So the mini lesson is, I'm not going to, no matter what publishers or educational consultants tell you, there's not one mini lesson that's going to meet everybody's needs. So I try to go with kind of the biggest bang for my buck. And I want to model something for maybe 10 to 12 minutes, even shorter now that I'm online, and then release kids to get in and do that work. During the opening is where kids are looking at those learning targets and making sure that they understand and know what's happening. The last part of the workshop, I'm really thinking about kids. I'm really having kids go back to those targets and kind of reflect on how they got smarter. What do they know now that they didn't know before? And what do they think they need next? So on the side, you can kind of see where I'm anticipating students' needs. So this was for that summer school class. Stephen read at like a second grade level. And so I anticipated him sometimes needing a different text that just maybe he would read. Caleb was, just Mr. Personality. It didn't matter where I moved him or, he talked to everybody. So I had to be really strategic in who I had him work with, somebody that could help him stay on task and not just be silly or play video games. Sabrina was an English learner and oftentimes needed more modeling. So I wanted to think about, okay, what might she not get the first time that I got to go check in? In the open letter, one of the targets that the kids had to write was a call to action. And that was something I was pretty sure nobody in the class knew what it was. And so I was just kind of anticipating that. And during work time, I was going to just ask kids if they understood that target. And maybe that was going to be my mini lesson for the following day. This little bit right here really helps me to think about what kids are going to be doing instead of what I'm going to be doing. And as a new teacher, I was always thinking about what I was going to do during class, and kind of putting that shoe on the other foot, thinking about what kids are going to do has really kind of helped me anticipate students' needs. So more kids are engaged for more minutes of the class period. This last one, this tending, okay, this is going to sound kind of dumb, but I mean, this I think is so important, especially now during this time of COVID. My new favorite saying is Maslow before Bloom's. And I did not make this up. Larry Farazlo, who writes for Ed Week, wrote about this several years ago. He's this amazing teacher, works with English learners. And he kind of coined that phrase that, like, thinking about these humans that we have the privilege to teach, touching base with them. And, what are some just kind of common things that we can do. And so that first one, writing back, I know you all are doing that. But what I'm talking about writing back is I try to write back to every kid, just like a personal note, short, maybe like 2 sentences once a week, that I just, how you doing? Do you have a team in the Super Bowl that you're cheering for? You're just kind of something that's just kind of trying to hook them in the heart a little bit. Finding a special text. I think that's one. Like, it's really an honor when somebody, so my friend Charmaine, who's up in Saskatoon, she was the one that actually sent me 3 Day Road. And she said, if you like things to carry, you're going to love this book. And that meant so much to me to have someone pick a text. Fernando was a big Bronco or Atlanta Falcon fan, you could see. Yeah. And so oftentimes I would just look at the sports page to see if there was something about the Falcons that I could cut out and say, hey, here's an article I think you might like. Asking kids questions, not around curriculum, but questions around pop culture, questions about, how things are going and are they doing okay? And what do they need? I think that whole piece about just kind of smiling. I remember my first year teaching, the sort of seasoned, wizened teammate of mine said, don't smile before November or they'll take advantage of you. And I think that's just backwards. We've got to make this connection. So many of our kids are suffering right now. And just that human connection is really important. I also think manipulating time, I'm really trying to let kids drive how time is being used right now, as opposed to the bell schedule. Nobody in the States has got this figured out with COVID. And I don't know if you guys up in Canada do, but we sure don't. And so if we don't take some risks and try some new things now with how we're using time, now I can't think of a better time to do it. So when I think about these 6 T's, I write a lot about them in the book, and a lot of the pieces are around stories. And I just saw my friend Barry Wilson on the chat. And so Barry, you know how much we love stories, and that whole idea of we learn through stories, and lots of stories about my students. And I hope they'll make you laugh, and I hope they'll make you smile. And you'll hear my mistakes and my successes. Lots and lots of re-engagement strategies, ways to kind of rehook kids. So when we think about those 6 T's, I'm going to go back here. Sorry about that. I should have put 2 slides in here. But so this slide right here, like, sometimes when a kid is not showing up or when a kid is disengaged, it might be because the text is too hard, or it might be because of the topic. So my 3 or 4 kids who didn't want to know about Syria, they wanted to know about the kids being separated at the borders. I didn't throw out the whole topic. I just changed the case study. Maybe a target that I've asked kids to work on isn't hitting what that student needs right now. Or maybe the task is stupid or too hard for the kid, or maybe I need to model. So when I think about these T's, maybe I can add a little more time, or maybe I need to speed up a little bit more. Maybe I just need to figure out how to help the student figure out, hook the student up with a social worker because their family is struggling to get food. I'm using these T's on the day-to-day basis as a way to kind of tweak my instruction, not throw everything out, but to just tweak the instruction. So in addition to some of the re-engagement and the 6 T's, there's lots of different planning models. There's social studies ideas, science ideas, a few math ideas, lots of language arts ideas on how to kind of think ahead and anticipate students' needs. And then I don't know if you're like me, but whenever I get a professional book, the very first thing I do is I go to the back and I look at the appendices and I look and see if there's anything good that I can use tomorrow. So I try to put ones in there that were helpful. So there's blank templates, but then I thought, okay, I'm going to do a think aloud on the templates and talk about how I'm using them, because I want them to be versatile enough that you don't have to create something new every time. You can just make small changes. And so kind of thinking through how I change them slightly depending on the topic I'm teaching or the subject area or even the grade level. So there's, ones in there you could use with 4th grade on up. My bottom line that I'm really just trying to stick tough to is this idea of engagement. And for me, all kids, all roads are leading to engagement. And this idea that not one thing is going to work for every kid, and teaching is so incredibly complex and so difficult. This idea of thinking of it as this endeavor or challenge, but really it's just a slog. It's a kid by kid slog to try to figure out how we can get kids going and moving. So as I'm kind of wrapping this up, one of the things that I shared with a group of teachers not too long ago was, even the best reading and writing strategies are going to fail if kids are disengaged. I think sometimes we try to think of this really cool activity, but if they don't know a reason, they don't see a purpose, if there isn't some authenticity, it doesn't matter what we're doing. It's not going to help if they're disengaged. So this idea of kind of anticipating students' needs, and even doing it now, you know your students, but thinking about, okay, I haven't seen Javier for 5 days. Maybe he'll show up tomorrow. So what's he going to need if he does show up? I think also thinking about those T's and how you can tweak them to pull in a kid or two each day. And then I think this idea of cultivating curiosity, how do we reignite that curiosity and help kids see how fascinating the world is around us. Sarah Ahmed says in her book that the world gives us curriculum every single day. And so how do we reignite that curiosity? As I wrap up, I want to tip my hat to you all. I know sometimes when I get on Twitter, when I'm on Facebook, I hear teachers that are feeling discouraged and are feeling like they're not making a difference. And I think when we look back on this time period, you all will be seen as historical heroes. You are the ones who are showing up sick, who are showing up tired, who are there day in and day out for kids. And so I want to thank you. I want to share my respect and appreciation for all that you're doing. And I especially thank you for being here tonight after working a long day. So with that, I think I'm just going to toss the ball back over to Lionel, and we might have a little bit of time to chat.
We do, which is good. So thank you very much. It's that was great and very interesting. And I think as I said to you, as a senior physics teacher by training, I'm always fascinated in sort of seeing, if you like, these core skills that I just have always assumed the kids have, right? Like they'd come into my class, and it's somewhat selective being physics, so most of them do have those skills. But then you see stats like that. What was it again? I wrote it down. I couldn't believe it. That 67 minutes a day versus a minute. Like a minute. Like that's crazy, right? So So when you and just so you know, you also asked about time. If anyone's got that figured out, no one does. That I know. That I know for sure. But I was curious, when you talk about the engagement and you talk about the building the opportunity, and you had the pictures of a couple of your students, and the Maslow before Bloom, like there's a lot of you coming out in all of this. How long before you found kids start to realize, wow, Miss Tovani, she's in this for me and she's finding things and this is kind of cool and I'm engaged? Like, it's not overnight. So is there, how long do you have to stick with that?
That's such a good question. I think that really helped me was that emotional engagement. Like, I'm just so curious about kids. So, when they would walk in the room, I was like reading their t-shirts and asking them questions about, what's good music? What do you listen to? But I think the other secret is that it happens quickly if you're thinking about that workshop model, where you're letting kids have time to work. And so while kids are working, I'm not grading papers, I'm pulling small groups, or I'm conferring, and I'm thinking about, I'm asking them things like, okay, what are you figuring out? What are you struggling with? What are you wondering? And if they say, I don't know, then that's my opportunity to model. Here's what I was thinking about when I first read this, or here's what I tried. And I think that big chunk of yellow work time really helps me to connect quickly and get to know kids quickly. I think the other pieces is I'm not looking for one right answer. And so I'm really just looking for thinking. Yeah. And I try, and you'll see this in the book, I try to be vulnerable by showing my mistakes and showing how, this is how I failed miserably the first time I tried to do this, or the second time, the third time. And so she's really trying to help us figure out something that we can get better at.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You probably can't see it when I hold the sheet up here. I drew the circle as a planning idea. I've never seen a lesson put that way. And there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of work time in there, and that might scare some people. But like you said, I mean, it gives you there's where your time comes in. You actually get time to interact with the kids, as opposed to, this standard today, this outcome, or this expectation today, and I got to cover this in the next 15 minutes, or the world's going to end. So it's almost, the circle almost humanizes your classroom in some way. I like it.
Yeah, I bet you did that when you did labs. I bet during your science labs, the bulk of the time kids were doing the experimenting. And when you look at great athletic coaches, great hockey coaches don't talk all practice, right? They model something, they send the players out, the players practice, and while the players are practicing, coaches are giving them feedback. And so trying to think about like who's doing the work and what kind of work are they doing? Is it worthy of their time?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I hope I don't put you on the spot with this next question, but one of my favorite books in the last while is Marianne Wolf's book about Reader Come Home and the digital brain. And, we talk about that minute of reading, and I don't know if this is a stereotype, but, we see a lot of kids who maybe not only are sort of being tough and shying away from reading, but then they've got this phone with images and screens. And so does that get in the way of that opportunity to read? I mean, I've got my phone and I can just be looking at pictures and images instead of words.
Sure. I mean, I do think that I do think that it does. I think it's a different kind of reading, and I'm trying to learn about it and figure it out. I think it's something that is never going to go away, right? It's like Socrates worried about people learning how to write, that storytelling was going to go away. Yeah. I think technology's here, and it's going to just get more, it's going to be easier for kids to access. And so I really have to think about, finding juicy text, finding text that they can look at as models, showing them and helping them, giving them opportunities to create text that exists in the world. And I think that's digital text opportunity. Sometimes the makes are digital text. And so I'm just trying to think about, what is worthy of their time, and what is it that they're used to, right? Yeah. I can't compete with the phone, so I have to work really hard to find it and give them other reasons to read it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fair enough. That's good. Good. Barry's asking, how do you let teachers know that the time to practice isn't confined to that one class of 45, which I find a crazy short period of time to 55 minutes in a day because it's, the English class or whatever.
Yeah. So can I go back to the slide, or can people see the slide? Or do we
Sure.
just
Oh
have to
yeah, yeah.
remember it in our head?
Yeah, no problem.
So
Yeah.
Barry, thank you so much for asking that question, because you're right. Like, some classes are 42 minutes. That was my first year in high school. I had 42-minute classes. Ridiculous. So when you think about this circle, I really kind of think about it as a cycle. And I don't want these parts of workshop to handcuff me. So at the beginning of the cycle really starts here, kind of going over the opening, so here's what we're going for, kids. Here's the targets. And then what's the mini lesson? What's the work time? So if I get all the way around and I'm like kind of at 3 o'clock and the bell rings, I don't start the whole over. And I might do a quick catch and kind of remind kids what they did the day before, and then throw them back into that work time. And so, I just kind of continue around the wheel. Now, here's the other thing. You don't have to necessarily start here at the opening. So Ugo's class had started at 7:10 in the morning, and many of those kids worked till midnight. And so often many of them came in 15, 20 minutes late. I was just thankful that they even made the effort to get there. So for me to do the mini lesson first thing, that was stupid, because I was missing 5 to 10 kids. So I started with, here's our target, here's what we're going for today. I want you to get your work folders out, or your reading out, and I'd let them dig in, and then I would confer. And then when those kids got there, that's when I did the mini lesson.
Right.
So I think we have to be smart and use the workshop wheel as use it to serve kids, not handcuff us thinking you have to, just stay in this rigid order. So it might take me 3 days to get through a whole wheel, depending on, if I talk too much during the mini lesson, and I'm sure that's shocking to you guys that I could talk that long, but if I talk too much on Monday, then on Tuesday, I don't get to talk. They got to work more. They got to have that work time back.
So
now,
a lesson is not a
keep them
class.
working for this big portion. Right. And so that's why I have to anticipate needs. If I want them to work for big chunks of time, I have to have multiple texts. I have to be ready to model something for a group of kids.
Great. Good. Well, I think we've come to the end of our questions there, Cris. So I'll give you the last word in a moment here. But first, just on behalf of everyone today, thank you so much for sharing some insights into your new book. I suspect it must be nice to have your life back now that it's published, and you can poke your head out from behind the computer screen and see that there is a sky out there, because these things do take a lot of time. So we appreciate sort of getting some insight into that today. And thank you on behalf of everyone. Thank you so much for taking your time to share your expertise with us over the last hour or so. And if I'd leave you to just close us out for the night, would be great.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for being here, and I want to tell you how much I miss you. I was too embarrassed because of our president to go to Canada for the first 3 years, and then COVID hit, and then I couldn't go to Canada. So I just want to tell you, thank you for sticking by us, and thank you for your hard work and all that you do for children. Just hang in there. I think there's a new day dawning here.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next month for our next presentation with Pembroke Publishers. Have a good evening and a good weekend that's coming up as well. Hopefully it's a relaxing one. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.